Hello, and welcome back to Unsavory History. My name is Valerie, and today I want to talk about something that some people keep pretending is new: the attempt to control women by controlling their bodies, their independence, and their place in society. Some people act like the attack on women's autonomy started with Roe versus Wade being overturned, and it didn't. This country has been trying to control women for generations. Back in 1873, the Comstock Act criminalized the distribution of contraception and abortion information under the guise of morality. Not because society was collapsing or because women were dangerous, but because women with bodily autonomy are harder to control. A woman who can decide if and when she has children is harder to financially trap, harder to force into dependence, and harder to silence. And that fear just never disappeared. Fast forward to today. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, many people said women were overreacting. They said no one is coming for birth control. No one wants to control women. It's just about states' rights. And yet, now we're seeing bills like North Carolina's House Bill 1232, introduced by Representative Keith Kidwell. The bill states any person who willfully seeks to destroy the life of another person by any means at any stage of life or succeeds in doing so shall be held accountable for attempted murder or for first degree murder, respectively. It also states any person has the right to defend his or her own life or the life of another person, even by the use of deadly force if necessary. This is where people become terrified because once legislation defines life as beginning at fertilization, critics argue that the wording opens the door for abortion to be treated as a first degree murder and creates deeply dangerous implications surrounding violence justified in the name of protecting life. Now, before people rush to say that's not what they mean, I think that's exactly the issue. Women are constantly expected to trust vague laws written mostly by people who will never personally face the consequences of them. What makes this even more disturbing is the contrast in punishment. In North Carolina, first degree forcible rape is a Class B1 felony, punishable by a minimum of 12 years in prison and up to life without parole. Second degree forcible rape can carry sentences ranging from a few years to under 2 decades, depending on the circumstances and prior record. But under legislation like HB1232, women seeking abortions could potentially face first degree murder charges, meaning life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. Think about the message that sends. A woman who is raped may or may not live to see her attacker receive less punishment than she could face for terminating a pregnancy. And some people wonder why women are scared and why we're so angry. Honestly, this goes so much deeper than abortion. Because the expectation that women exist to serve others is still deeply ingrained in our culture. I, for instance, am 35 years old and I was raised to believe that my purpose in life was to make my husband or partner happy, that my job was to make their life easier, to provide a clean home, to not add stress, and keep everyone else comfortable before myself. And when I got divorced, do you know what people told me? They told me it was my fault because I didn't wear enough makeup, because I had gained weight, because I didn't keep a hot meal waiting for my husband when he got home, because I had failed at my wifely duties by not keeping the house perfectly clean. Not whether I was happy, not whether I felt loved, and certainly not whether I was respected. Just whether I had successfully performed womanhood in the way society expected me to. Then, at 30 years old, I was diagnosed with primary ovarian insufficiency, early menopause. I was told I could not naturally have children, as well as I was at a higher risk for various cancers. Almost immediately, I felt the way people looked at me change, even people close to me. It was like my value as a woman had suddenly decreased because I could no longer provide children. Like I had become disconnected from what society thought I was supposed to be. Not a person grieving a life changing diagnosis, not a person trying to process loss, just a woman who had somehow failed at womanhood. And that experience made me realize something deeply unsettling. So much of a woman's worth is still tied to what she can provide to other people: her beauty, her labor, her emotional support, her sexuality, her fertility, her ability to sacrifice herself for others, and her ability to stay small and palatable. And the moment she cannot or will not provide those things, society often treats her like she has less value, that she is a hysterical or a bitch. And this pattern doesn't stop at reproductive rights. Look at the SAVE Act. On the surface, it sounds simple, requiring documentation that matches a person's legal identity in order to vote. But for millions of women who traditionally change their last names after marriage, presenting a birth certificate requires navigating extra bureaucratic hurdles to prove their name change, which critics argue creates a massive barrier to voting. The same issue affects transgendered individuals whose names no longer match their identity assigned to them at birth. While supporters claim this is about election security, critics point out that vague documentation requirements have historically been used to restrict voting access. That's what leads so many to worry, because women are watching laws pile up that increasingly tie their rights, identity, bodily autonomy, and even participation in society to government approval and documentation. That's why I get so frustrated when people pretend these conversations are only about abortion, because they're not. They're about the role women are supposed to have. Historically, women couldn't open bank accounts without men. Domestic violence was treated as a private family issue, and marital rape was not criminalized in all 50 states until 1993. And even then, many states still treated it differently than non marital rape. And it may or may not be a surprise, but North Carolina was the last state to finally make marital rape illegal in 1993. 1993. There are women alive right now who grew up in a country where the law effectively told them that once they were married, their body no longer fully belonged to them. That is not ancient history. And every single time women gain more autonomy, the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to leave marriages, the right to control reproduction, the right to say no, there is a backlash. Not because society is collapsing, but because power structures are shifting. That's why these conversations are always come wrapped in words like tradition, family values, and morality. Because control sounds kinder when you rename it protection. But the question we have to ask is, protection from whom? And I want to be clear, this is not me saying all men are evil. This is not me saying families are bad or relationships are bad. I'm not saying that. For a very long time, society has rewarded women for being small, obedient, accommodating, attractive, quiet, and useful to others, while punishing women who prioritize themselves, their independence, or their own autonomy. The Comstock Act, the repeal of Roe, the attacks on contraception, the obsession with traditional women. It's a different century, but same rhetoric, same people trying to control us. Women who cannot and should not be controlled. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share to others. And I hope to see you on the next one. The next episode I am doing is about the history of birth control and its ties to eugenics. And there will be an entire eugenics series coming up within the next few weeks. Again, thank you so much, and this has been Valerie and Unsavory History. Bye bye.